2025, China spent $500 billion on energy in a single year. Not over a decade. Not across a 5-year plan, 1 year. That is more than the entire GDP of countries like Norway, Thailand, or the UAE. And here is what makes that number genuinely hard to process. The West did not see the full picture until it was already done. America added roughly 55 gigawatts of new power capacity that year. China added 540 gigawatts, nearly 10 times more. And that gap is still growing. To understand why this matters, you need to understand one thing China has feared for decades. 80% of China's oil imports travel through a single narrow passage called the Strait of Malacca, a corridor less than 3 kilometers wide at its tightest point. One decision in Washington, one naval blockade, and an economy of 1.4 billion people starts running out of fuel within weeks. Chinese planners have called this the Malacca Dilemma, and it has kept them up at night for 30 years. The answer they chose was not a bigger pipeline, not a larger oil reserve, and not a diplomatic negotiation. The answer was to build an entirely different energy system, one that runs on sunlight, air, and water, instead of oil that has to cross an ocean. What followed was the largest energy investment program in human history. According to China's National Energy Administration, the total investment in key energy projects in 2025 alone hit 3.5 trillion yuan, roughly 500 billion US dollars. That figure grew nearly 11% from the previous year, making it the first time China's annual energy spending ever reached that level. Clean energy investment contributed 15.4 trillion yuan to the national economy in 2025. That is 11.4% of China's entire GDP. For the first time ever, non-fossil power sources, solar, wind, hydro, and nuclear combined, crossed 60% of China's total installed capacity. This was not a transition happening slowly in the background. This was a structural shift that redrew the entire global energy map in under 5 years. Start with solar, because the numbers here do not fit inside normal frames of reference. By the end of 2025, China had installed 1.2 terawatts of cumulative solar capacity. To put that number in plain language, China alone holds nearly half of all the solar power ever installed anywhere on Earth. In 2025 alone, China added 315 gigawatts of new solar, a single-year record that no other country has come close to matching. In the first half of 2025, China installed more new solar than the entire rest of the world combined. In May of that year alone, 93 gigawatts came online in a single month, a figure larger than the entire solar capacity of most major economies. The United States, for comparison, added 47 gigawatts of solar in all of 2024. China did more than that in a single week at its peak installation rate. Think about what 1 terawatt of solar actually means in human terms. The electricity generated by China's solar fleet in 2025 alone, roughly 4 trillion kilowatt-hours from renewables, exceeded the total power consumption of all 27 countries in the European Union. Not matched. Exceeded. China reached its 2030 wind and solar target in 2024, 6 full years ahead of schedule. And instead of stopping, it kept building. Solar and wind together now account for 47% of China's total installed power capacity, fundamentally changing the country's energy identity. Analysts at Ember confirmed that China was responsible for more than half of every solar panel installed on Earth in 2025. And the infrastructure to make those panels is almost entirely inside China's borders. Nobody is catching up on this manufacturing lead in any foreseeable frame, but even a terawatt of solar panels cannot power a city when the sun goes down. That is the fundamental problem every renewable energy system faces, and it is the problem China just solved in a way no one else has attempted at this scale. In late December 2025, in the Gobi Desert outside Golmud in Qinghai Province, China switched on a facility that engineers had been theorizing about for 50 years. They call it the Super Air Power Bank. Here is what it does. It takes ordinary air, the same air you are breathing right now, and cools it to minus 194 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, air stops being a gas and becomes a liquid you can pour into tanks and store like any other fuel. When you need electricity, you let the liquid air warm back up, and it expands 750 times its original volume. That violent expansion drives turbines, the turbines spin generators, and electricity flows back into the grid. The facility, built by China Green Development Investment Group in partnership with the Chinese Academy of Sciences, has an installed capacity of 60 megawatts and 600 megawatt-hours of storage. Each single charge cycle runs continuously for 10 straight hours. The largest lithium battery installations in the world typically deliver 4 to 5 hours of output. This system doubles that window and uses zero lithium, zero cobalt, and zero rare earth minerals that need to be mined and shipped from elsewhere. Its annual electricity generation is projected at 180 million kilowatt hours, enough to power 30,000 homes every year. The system runs alongside a connected 250 megawatt solar farm, charging itself entirely on renewable energy during daylight and releasing that stored power back at night. Round-trip efficiency sits above 55%, with cold storage efficiency exceeding 95%. The technology has existed in theory for decades, researched in Germany, the United Kingdom, and South Korea, but none of those nations brought it to commercial scale. China built the world's largest demonstration project of this technology in the middle of a desert at high altitude, in one of the harshest operating environments on the planet, and it worked. This is the missing piece that every renewable energy system has been searching for. A storage solution that scales without the supply chain problems that come with chemical batteries. Now take the liquid air story and connect it to the molecule that ties everything together. That molecule is hydrogen. Hydrogen is the lightest element in the universe, and when you burn it, the only thing that comes out the other side is water vapor. No carbon dioxide, no particulate matter, no exhaust that heats the planet. The problem with hydrogen has never been what it does. The problem has always been how you make it and how much that costs. For most of history, almost all hydrogen was made from natural gas, a process that produces enormous amounts of CO2 as a byproduct. That is the hydrogen that runs the world's fertilizer plants and chemical factories right now, and it is one of the dirtiest industrial processes on Earth. Green hydrogen is different. You split water using electricity, and if that electricity comes from solar or wind, the entire process produces nothing but the hydrogen you need and oxygen that goes back into the air. China now controls 60% of the world's electrolyzer manufacturing capacity. An electrolyzer is the machine that splits water into hydrogen and oxygen, the critical piece of hardware for the entire green hydrogen economy. Chinese manufacturers like LONGi Hydrogen and Peric can produce alkaline electrolyzer systems for below $250 per kilowatt, dramatically undercutting Western competitors on cost. The province of Guangdong alone is building an offshore wind farm project directly connected to electrolyzers, targeting 80,000 tons of green hydrogen every year from a single installation. In its 15th five-year plan covering 2026 to 2030, Beijing has written hydrogen into national energy law with the same legal status as oil and natural gas. The government has set a target price of below 25 yuan per kilogram of green hydrogen by 2030, roughly $3.5, and committed 33 billion yuan in direct investment to reach that goal. For context, the current international market price of green hydrogen sits between $4 and $12 per kilogram, depending on location. China is engineering its way to the cheapest green hydrogen on the planet through a combination of scale, solar cost advantages, and manufacturing efficiency that no other country is currently matching. And what happens when hydrogen becomes cheap and plentiful changes every energy-intensive industry on Earth simultaneously. Ships can run on ammonia made from green hydrogen. Japan and South Korea are already testing ammonia-powered vessels in real ocean conditions. Steel mills that currently pour coal into blast furnaces can switch to hydrogen-fed direct reduction processes. Synthetic aviation fuel made from captured CO2 and green hydrogen is already being produced commercially in Shanghai by a company called Carbonology, which opened in January 2026 in the Lingang district. Airlines cannot tell the difference between this synthetic fuel and standard jet fuel. The chemistry is identical. Now step back and look at what all of this actually means beyond the engineering. For more than a century, global power ran on a simple logic. Control the oil, control the world. The Persian Gulf sits on 60% of the world's proven reserves. Countries that controlled access to those reserves, or the shipping routes they traveled, held enormous leverage over every economy that depended on them. America's naval dominance, built over decades at enormous cost, was designed precisely to maintain that leverage. The Strait of Malacca, the Strait of Hormuz, the Suez Canal, these were not just geography, they were the control points of civilization. What China has now demonstrated is that the physics of that system can be bypassed entirely. Not politically, not diplomatically, but technically. If your electricity comes from the sun above your own territory, no navy can cut off your supply chain. If your hydrogen comes from water split by that electricity, no sanctions regime can starve your industry. If your storage comes from compressed air cooled in a tank in your own desert, no foreign government holds a switch that turns it off. Columbia University's Center on Global Energy Policy confirmed in May 2026 that clean energy investment contributed 11.4% of China's GDP in 2025, making the energy transition an economic engine, not just a policy choice. The economic case has already been made. The strategic case has already been made. What is left is the execution, and China is executing at a speed that leaves little time for the rest of the world to calibrate its response. China already manufactures 65% of the world's solar panels. It produces 60% of the world's electrolyzers. It has installed half of all the cumulative solar capacity on Earth, and it is exporting that infrastructure outward, not just using it at home. Countries in Southeast Asia, Africa, and Central Asia are receiving Chinese solar farms, Chinese grid technology, and Chinese financing simultaneously. The product is different from oil, but the logic is identical. Whoever supplies the energy infrastructure that the world runs on holds the deepest influence over how that world operates. 30 years ago, China was a net importer of almost every critical technology it needed. Today, in the sector that will define the next century, it is the manufacturer, the installer, and the exporter. That shift did not happen by accident, and it did not happen quietly. It happened through 20 years of deliberate investment, patient planning, and an engineering culture that treated every failed prototype as a problem to solve, rather than a signal to stop. Here is the honest summary of where things stand in May 2026. China's total installed power capacity has reached 3.89 terawatts, up 16% in a single year. Its solar fleet alone generates more electricity than the entire EU consumes. Its liquid air storage technology is already operating at commercial scale in the Gobi Desert. Its electrolyzer manufacturing cost is already below the level that makes green hydrogen economically viable against fossil alternatives in many markets. And the 15th five-year plan, launched in 2026, commits to pushing all of these further, targeting 3.6 terawatts of wind and solar capacity by 2035, with hydrogen and long-duration storage as the next wave of investment. For Western automakers, utilities, and governments, the question being asked in closed boardrooms and energy ministries right now is not whether this transition is real. The question is how much ground has already been seeded and how long it takes to respond. Because the gap in solar manufacturing, electrolyzer production, and grid-scale storage technology did not form overnight. It formed across 10 years of investment decisions where one side was scaling and one side was debating. The world that ran on oil did not announce its own ending. It just started losing customers to something faster, cleaner, and impossible to blockade. One panel at a time, one tank of liquid air at a time, 1 kilogram of green hydrogen at a time, the transition is already built. The only thing left to determine is how quickly the rest of the world catches up, and whether catching up is even still on the table. If this video changed how you think about global energy and global power, hit the like button right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because we cover these shifts the moment the data confirms them, not months later. The next video is going to connect one more dot that most people have completely missed about where this is all heading. You do not want to see that one late. Before you go, here is the question I want you to answer in the comments. If China successfully makes green hydrogen cheaper than fossil fuels by 2030, which country do you think will be the most unprepared for that shift? Drop your answer below. I read every single comment. See you in the next one. Subscribe to Bayfi Insight right now for unique, fascinating, and mind-blowing projects.